very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, you know, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something, you know.
Get that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Warcry Podcast. I am your host, Jehovah Tiger, and on this wonderful Friday evening, I've been hyping this show all week. You know, I can't wait to get into some of the spooky and different things that we're going to get into tonight. But before we do, I wanted to say I appreciate everyone that has come on the podcast over the last, month. We got more stuff coming. Sunday, I will be with Cryptids of the Corn podcast. I believe that's at 8 o'clock, 7:30. I have to read. I keep telling y'all. Maybe it's 7:30, maybe it's 8. I have to read. Look, we just confirmed the time. But Cryptids of the Corn podcast be coming on the show Sunday night. And then on Tuesday, I'm bringing back Mr. Kevin Nez from the Mac Nez podcast and East Society podcast. I had a lot of people, reach out about that episode. And we talked about a lot of horror movies and different topics. We didn't even get to half of them. I think we got through a quarter of them. There's so many different movies. But we talked about vampire movies. We talked about werewolf movies, zombie movies. So we're going to be doing a part 2 on Tuesday at the same time. I believe 7:30 or 8 o'clock, 8:30. But I just wanted to, like I said, I just wanted to let you guys know that I appreciate everybody that has supported the podcast. And tonight's guest, you guys absolutely hated me for a while. You guys were upset with me. The interview that I did with Mr. Patrick Meechan, I broke it up into parts. And I heard some of you guys was not that happy about that. I had some people message me, man, how you going to hit us with a cliffhanger? How you going to hit us with this? How you going to do this to us? We want to know the story. And so I dropped. If you haven't heard it, go back. It's with Patrick Meechan. And I dropped the full thing, and people were like, yeah, this is what we want. And I promised you guys back, I think back in, I guess when we did this, I can't remember, early part of the year, I promised you guys that I would have him back. And so I appreciate Patrick coming on a second time. And let me introduce Mr. Patrick Meechan. Patrick, how's it going, man?
It's going very well, and I appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, man, I can't tell you how many people were like, man, that story is wicked, man. That's a crazy story. And, I had done some kind of looking into some of the stuff that you're talking about here in the last, because I knew I was going to eventually have you on. So I was doing some, looking around, and I saw there was an actual Hulu documentary about a lot of the stuff that you were talking about. It's called The Amish Witches, and it's in Holmes County.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I've heard of it. It's funny. I said this long before anybody was even accepting that this could be true, but it is true. And there have been multiple movies and documentaries, TV shows, all these things that have come out since that time. Would they ever have come out if I didn't share my story? I don't know. I'm going to tell you this. I fully believe that the latest Paranormal Activity movie, which was called Next of Kin, was completely created based on things that were in Nightmare in Holmes County. And the reason I'm going to say that, and I have photographic proof, of course, because I screenshotted everything, but I had contacted Orrin Pelly, who's the producer of the Paranormal Activity movies, in early October 2017. And I sent him a trailer, my video trailer. If you haven't seen it, it is on YouTube, but it's the video trailer for the original first edition of Nightmare in Holmes County. And that shows that, I'm showing you proof positive that there is witchcraft and Satanism alive and well in Holmes County, and it is the Amish. Now, I'm sure there's non-Amish doing it as well, though. But it's shocking when people think, well, these are very religious people doing this. It's kind of hard for people to get their mind around, but it's all true. But I sent him that message in 2017, and his response was, thank you, but I'm not interested in any new projects or anything at this time. Okay, go to October 2021. And what was released in October of 2021 was the latest Paranormal Activity movie called Next of Kin. And that's 4 years later. Now, we all know when a movie is produced, it's usually done about a year before it's ever released.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind that COVID happened during that time. So that delays things even more. What was the movie about? Well, suddenly, even though every previous Paranormal Activity movie followed a storyline, had different people that ended up being sucked into the same scenario, all related back to the original characters. But suddenly, with Next of Kin, it is completely removed from any of the other movies. It's a crowbar change, difference from the other movies. And what is it about? Satanic stuff going on among the Amish. I do not believe he just off on a whim just dreamed this up. I believe he took my video trailer, looked at the information, and then cooked up another story based on that, and figured I'll change it enough that I can say he can't say I stole it from him. I've talked to when I found out in 2021, I talked to litigation attorneys in Hollywood about it, and basically Hollywood protects its own, but pretty much people could not believe that it was not ripped off from my book, because when you look at the details, like, where did this come from? Where did this suddenly he starts making movies about this? And then I have that original message from 2017. So I fully do believe that in addition to other movies that I think were in TV shows that were inspired by my book and what I had to say, I believe this movie was totally inspired by it. Only thing I will say about that is, he could have had me as a consultant, and I could have made the movie much more realistic, because his characterization and the way he presented the Amish, I could have made it much more realistic. I lived out there around them. I know what they are. I know how they look. I know what they do. So that's all I can really say about that. But yeah, it's definitely, there's information out there now. It was not out there before I came out with, what I had to say about Holmes County.
Yeah, man. Like I said, that spooked me out a little bit. I was like, man, okay. So I watched the first episode, and I was like, man, that's odd. That's very. Do you have me on in the background? I'm hearing that echo again.
Let me turn my speakers down a little bit here. Okay. Is that better?
Let me see here. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I kept that was the same. Yeah, the same thing that happened the other night. Anyways, but no, like that's one thing that's kind of strange about that, man. Is I watched the first episode, and I said, man, that's okay. Patrick's cooking with something over here, and that's crazy that they took your movie, or they took your idea for the movie. That's
I fully
insane.
believe it. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think any reasonable, rational person that would look, and like I said, I have screenshots of the messages. I don't think any rational person could look at the message, look at what I sent him, and then turn around 4 years later, and he's releasing a movie 4 years almost to the date of the message from me. And you figure you got to come up with a storyline, you got to write a script, you got to find actors, you got to find location. All those things take time, and then in addition, you have throw COVID into the mix.
Yeah.
You got from very beginning of 2020 into that with no. It's going to be very difficult to make movies during that time. You're definitely going to have delays and issues. So I fully, in my opinion, 100%, he got the ideas from what I sent him, which was all about my book. So
So
it is what it is.
yeah. So speaking about your book, can you give those? So I've had a lot of people join, or join me for this ride of this podcast,
Hmm.
and a lot of people, they usually pick up where they pick up. For those people that have never heard, your entire, I think we went up over 2 hours
Hmm.
of your original story. Could you give people just kind of a review, a cliff notes of your book and kind of what led you to writing that book and writing your books, really?
Yes. I actually have, altogether, I've written 4 books because my 2 current books, which are Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, are second editions of the original books. And they are greatly expanded from the time I wrote the original editions. In 2020, I was contacted by Beyond the Fray Publishing, and they said, we would like to republish your books. And I said, okay, I'm cool with that. But the stories have, a lot has happened since then. And there's a lot more to the stories at this point. Some of these things have continued. And I believe that I should add all that to the story. And they said, we agree. So I began rewriting the books and adding additional chapters. There's quite a bit more content to both books. And basically, what led me to ever writing these books in the first place was I had the very, in my opinion, very strange and unique experience of having 2 consecutive yet unrelated haunted houses. And, most people right off the bat, when they find out you lived in 2 haunted houses, they say, did something follow you from the first house? Which is a very good question and a very reasonable question, because that can and does happen. But in my case, the hauntings were completely unrelated. They, matter of fact, they were very different. The origins were different. And 225th Street, which actually happened second, that was the second of the 2 consecutive hauntings. That house was haunted long before I was there. I believe long before I was even born. So the hauntings were completely unrelated. Furthermore, Nightmare in Holmes County ended in the beginning of 2010. I should say the end of 2009. We performed a successful exorcism on the house and property. And beginning of 2010, even though the house had been on the market for 2 years and 10 months, so just short of 3 years, when we did the exorcism at the end of December 2009, all the activity in the house stopped and the house sold very quickly. In fact, within 60 days of the day that we did the exorcism on the property, I was moving to a new house, which just so happened to be 225th Street. When I moved into 225th Street, I started writing. I believed wholeheartedly, okay, that haunting, that situation, that nightmare that I just survived, it was like a nightmare that I felt that I could not wake up from. It was terrible. And I thought, God like radically delivered me from a horrible situation. And I feel like I need to tell other people because number one, I want to glorify God for what he did for me. Number two, I want other people that experience this to understand what to do because it is not a pleasant thing to live through. And you question your own sanity, other people question your sanity. It's very it's very unpleasant. And additionally, it's not just the paranormal activity that at times can be very terrifying. It's the oppression that goes with it. You are so oppressed that, I mean, you talk about depression. Depression is a terrible thing to experience. Oppression is even worse because there's an absolutely 100% spiritual component to it. And you're oppressed by the evil spirits that are around you, and they hate you. They want to destroy you, or better yet, they want to make you destroy yourself. So, I felt I need to share this story, and I'm living in 225th Street, and I'm beginning to write Nightmare in Holmes County, and things keep happening at 225th Street. and I like strange things. And I told my mother, I said, if I didn't know any better, I would think this house is haunted. I would think that something followed me from Holmes County, but I know it couldn't have because I know that exorcism was successful. But something is not right in this house. And shortly thereafter, my neighbor came over and introduced himself one day. The following day or the 2 days later, it was, within a couple of days, he returned again. And my mother and my sister and my brother-in-law were visiting, and we were out on the porch. And my neighbor came up, and in the book, I changed his name to Steve. And he started to inform me that the house was haunted. He welcomed me to the community, told me, we all help each other. If you need anything, let us know. And I said, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then he followed that with, that he had something he needed to tell me. And I interrupted him. And he said something like, well, that's the good news now for the bad news. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to tell me my house is haunted. And his eyes got big, his mouth dropped open, and he said, yeah, man, it is. He said, some dude killed himself in your basement a long time ago. And he said, and I turned around and I looked at my mom and I said, I told you so. And she's like, you did. And my sister's saying, oh no, what in the world's he talking about? Not again. Because we had just experienced this in Holmes County. And at that point, my neighbor's like, hey, I got more to tell you, but it'll have to wait. I'll talk to you another time. And he went back home. So I knew without any doubt at that moment, I knew I'm supposed to write a book about this house. I have to put all my energy into researching this haunting and dealing with it. And I'm going to put Nightmare in Holmes County on the back burner. And this book is going to be written first, and it's going to be titled The Address of the House, which was 225th Street. So that is where the title came from. But that's what got me into writing. I experienced these situations firsthand. And I can totally understand when someone else goes through these things. They're terrible. And my current book that I'm working on now, I'm getting closer to releasing. It's going to be called Shadows and Light Volume 1, and then there's going to be additional volumes. But Shadows and Light Volume 1 is going to deal with houses that I helped other people after that, that I helped other families that had hauntings. And the one story, I share a lot of exact dialogue and exact quotes from recorded audio and video from a particular house that I helped a family with. It was extremely haunted. And when I'm sharing that dialogue, I'm doing it. And I also realized when I was there that day, which was in 2014, when I was there that day, that after I had talked to the family multiple times on the phone, got their story, and then we went to the house, which was, it was quite a drive for us. And when I actually sat down and I met this family, I was getting more and more angry because what they were suffering was terrible. And one of the family members had cancer that I believed was related to the haunting. I believed it was related to possession. And I knew that they had reached out for help so many times previously. And every time a paranormal group came, they were interested in getting evidence and looking at everything through their view. So every one of those groups said, oh, it's just friendly ghosts. You have nothing to worry about. And I told them, I said, it is not ghosts. That is not what you're dealing with. And I'm going to deal with it the correct way. And when I then went through the house, we set up cameras, and before we even started the exorcism, I went through the house after talking with the family and visiting with them and getting to know them a little more. And I was very upset. I was angry, and I went through the house and I was like, guess what? You are leaving today. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to gather evidence. I'm not here to get EVPs of you cussing at me like you did other people. This time it's different. This time you're going to hell where you belong, because I'm not putting up with it. This family has suffered. They are Christians. I'm a Christian. We are in agreement. You're leaving. And I went through the house saying those things, renouncing things and everything. And then we spent some time eating with and getting to know the family some more, and paranormal activity started happening. Most of it was directed at me. And the bottom line, I was like, yeah, when you read what I said and I gave exact quotes, I did it for a reason. Like, you need to be careful um, how you address these things. You need to be careful. But at the same time, I knew, I'm not saying any of these things I'm saying in my own authority. I'm not saying it that you're going to leave because Patrick Meechan said you're going to leave. You're going to leave because I said in the name of Jesus Christ, you're going to leave.
Hey,
And that
Patrick.
was where all my confidence
Hey,
was. It was
Patrick.
not in me. I don't have confidence in me. I have confidence in God.
Hey, Patrick, do you have something beeping in the background?
My
Or
phone dinged and I just shut it off.
okay, yeah. I was like, man,
It
I
d- no,
kept
I
hearing it. I
kept
was like,
getting I kept getting messages, so I shut my phone off.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just kept hearing it when you were talking. I was like, what does that sound?
No, I got messages at an inopportune time, so I apologize. But basically, that's kind of what's just a wee little bit of what's going to be in the next book. But some of the evidence that will be in that book is, in my opinion, mind blowing. It's exclusive to me. It's stuff that I own, and it. But again, it's not to just. I like entertaining people because I think a lot of people. I think all human beings have a curiosity about spiritualism because we are spiritual beings.
Hmm.
And we all wonder what's going to happen. We all know we're going to die someday. What's going to happen after that? But then a lot of people also are like, I have had experiences that I cannot explain. They don't make any sense. They're not natural, and so they have questions and they have concerns about that. And my point is, yes, I want to tell a story that I do believe. No, I'm going to be completely truthful. The only thing I ever change is names, just out of respect to others, but the stories are completely true. And I feel that sharing them, I want to enlighten other people. And I want people to understand, if you deal with this is how you deal with it. But
For sure,
kind of
man.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, for sure. And that's one thing that when our first interview in the conversation we had, I remember telling you, man, you gave me serious. I think that might have been one of the few times I talk a lot. That's kind of what that's what I do,
Yeah.
and I was speechless. I was taken aback by a lot of the information and a lot of the stuff, from your books. And one thing too that's specifically about your story is it's almost like a movie. I mean,
Hmm.
it really is like, you go on this journey. You dealt with a lot of the demonic stuff, at the other house, and then all of a sudden you hear, you're in this new house and you experience this other stuff. And I'm just kind of curious. So once after, I guess for the audience, once you got, you started doing, um, you know, the book that you first started writing.
Hmm.
After that, you started working on, what happened, in the early 2000s, right? Is that kind of how
Yeah.
that shook out?
It actually, like after 2010, the original book Nightmare in Holmes County, that haunting, I lived there from 2002. We bought the property late in 2001, had the house built, moved in 2002. I moved out in 2010, beginning of the year. Then Nightmare 225th Street began at that point. I only lived in 225th Street 3 months.
Oh wow.
But
Uh,
I researched the haunting all the way back, and I always thought, it's not even correct to say that I researched it back to 1958, because at this point, for the second edition, I have researched it back to, the 1920s.
oh wow.
So, no question about it. There is, I know much more now than I knew in 2010 and 2009 and 10 and into 2011. As far as like about that house, there's things I could find out now that I could not find out. The other thing is I've had continued experiences. Also experiences regarding that house have continued for other people. So I could honestly write the third edition, and I'm not just saying that. This stuff it's legit. It is for real. Um, I have experiences still, but I don't think they're related specifically to 25th Street. I think they're related to I do write, and I write from a perspective that, I'm going to say it like this: people that just write about the paranormal, I think as a whole, any of those people for the most part would tell you, I have experiences when I write about this stuff because I think that's how it works. But when I'm doing it, I'm coming from a perspective that I think is more of a threat to the demonic realm because that's what I'm dealing with, I never want to just tell you the story. I want to also share this is how you deal with it so people can be enlightened. But when you do that, now you're a threat. So now you're going to really get messed with. And so I had experiences the whole time I was writing 225th Street, the first edition. I had experiences while I was writing Nightmare in Holmes County. I had experiences while I wrote the second editions. But you keep in mind during that time, I've helped numerous people that had problems either spiritually themselves or in their homes. So when you stick your neck out and help people, you will be messed with. And I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah, no
now to
doubt.
a place where I recognize it. And I think when I go into a place and there's stuff there, they're very smart. Demons have been around forever. I mean, they've been around for a long time. And I think when I go into a place, and I think a lot of people that have spiritual discernment run into the same thing. They know that you know things. They know that you have like spiritual gifts of discernment or knowledge, and you pick up on things that some people won't. And so I have experiences still. I've seen, honestly, I've seen black masses within the last 2 weeks. I've seen things.
Wow.
It's strange, and I won't say where I saw them, but I saw them in other places, and I know why I'm seeing it. It's there. I happen to be in that environment. They know that I'm aware of them. But it's funny. You if you watch there's some decent, and I know with AI, some of these things are going to be harder because unfortunately there's going to be people that are dishonest and try to make phony videos. And I know
Mhm.
that happens, which is horrible. But I know that a lot of the videos that people have posted online and, with their cell phones, and people have hauntings. And nowadays we're in a time period where people can get cameras in their house relatively easy if they want to. So people are picking up things more. And if you watch a lot of these, videos, you see these black masses. You see the black shadow people, you see the black masses, you see things moving. It gets picked up. And I can tell you this, that those are like exactly this experiences I have had. Some of them are in my books, some of them happened after the books, whatever. But or just continue to happen.
Yeah.
But these things
Um,
are real.
yeah. No, I 100% agree with you on that, and especially when it comes to maybe stuff following you around and you see
Mhm.
things that are, popping in the corner of the room. And
Yep.
so after you lived in that house 3 months. So that's kind of where we left off with the first interview that we did. Because then, we got into different questions, and after you were, you moved out of that house, what did anything else happen, or what was going on after that?
I will tell you, after I moved out and I started being more active doing exorcism and helping people with their homes and whatnot, over the next couple years up until around 2013, I was very active in doing that. And I had a lot of experiences during that time. I had things, I'll be totally honest with you. At one point, I was helping a gentleman. And well, I'll tell you the first one. There was a young lady in another state that contacted me thinking that her house was haunted. And I mean, she was many states away from where I am. And I said, well, I can talk for a few minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to talk to you more later tonight. I have an interview. I was on the Omega Man radio show that night. I had a long interview with Shannon Davis. But I told her, I said, tell me what is going on, and then I will call you back later tonight when I'm done with this interview. So, and again, she was more in the western part of the country, so she was a few hours behind me. But she told me these situations, how she totally believed her house was haunted. And I discerned from what she was saying, she's telling the truth, but it's not the house. She's got demons. She's under generational curses. This is something that's following her specifically. And I knew that. So I thought, when I call her back tonight, I'm gonna tell her that, and I'll help her any way I can. Well, Shannon's interview went over. So the time that I was supposed to call her, we're now like 20 minutes after 11 or whatever time it was my time. And I was supposed to call her at like 11. And I'm like, oh man, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to call her. She's calling me, and she's very upset, and she's crying, please call me, please call me. So as soon as I was done with the interview, I called her, and she's crying. She's outside her house. She said, I can't be in there. And she said, I'm hearing noises. I said, well, what are you hearing? And she said, it sounds like somebody slamming a door inside of a car inside my house. And obviously my car is not in my house. I have no way there's no way it's anything that's actually happening that I can see. Nothing's being slammed, but I'm hearing these horrible noises. I'm so scared I came outside. And she said that her boyfriend was on his way over to her house. And I said, I'm going to tell you something. I just hear me out. And I said, don't be upset, because I can't help you. And she said, okay. And I said, your house isn't haunted. You are. And she said, okay. Her boyfriend showed up, and I said, I said, I need to talk to him. Can you put him on the phone? And he got on the phone, and I said, are you a Christian? And he goes, yeah, I am a Christian. And I said, you're positive you're saved? He goes, yes. And I said, I'm only being thorough because I'm not there and you are. I'm going to do an exorcism on her, and I need you to be my eyes and ears, because I can't see. I said, I'll be able to hear with the speakerphone, but I said, I need you to do things that I'm going to tell you to do. And I need you to be telling me what is going on, So I basically, it started, and it was one of the most dramatic exorcisms. I mean, she was speaking another language that she did not know. It was not jibber jabber. It was not, it was real. It was real. And I don't know what the language was, but she was wearing a cross necklace that became hot to the touch, had to be taken off of her because it was burning her. At one point, she's screaming in this other language, and I can hear all this commotion. And I said, what is happening? And he said, she's on her back, but her back is arched up in the air real high, and she's bashing her head off the floor.
Whoa.
And I mean, it was crazy, and I went through a whole process with her. And I basically had him be the enforcer for everything that I was saying over the phone to her, But she had, I believe it went on about 3 hours. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I have notes, of course, but she had like 7 or 8 demons. Don't quote me on that. It could have been more. But when she had multiples, and there was a lot of generational demons, a lot of generational curses. At one point during the exorcism, I said to her, do you have any ancestry that is involved in Freemasonry? Now, that's not to upset anybody, but if anybody looks into Freemasonry, don't believe what the Freemasons tell you. Don't believe, if you're a Freemason, what the lodge tells you. Look into it for yourself, because they are not just a secret society of do-gooders. There's more to it. Most of the people involved in the Masons do not know how bad it is. They have no idea. They never move up in the Freemasons. They're like the Blue Lodge, which is the lowest level. Most of them have no idea beyond that. And they just think we help people, and this is good for my business or job promotions or whatever. But when the people move through the ranks of the Freemasons, even the first level, you have to take blood oaths. You make vows, and you take blood oaths, which means the vow might be, I will never disclose or discuss what goes on in these meetings. That's the vow. The oath is, if I do, you can cut me from ear to ear, cut my throat from ear to ear. You can slice open my belly. You can pull out my entrails, which is your intestines, and burn them. I mean, these are all blood oaths. So the oath means if you don't keep the vow, you've given yourself over to a curse. When you take those those vows and oaths, when you take those, a curse comes on you and on your family. The farther you go into the Freemasons and the more vows and oaths you take, the more curses and the worse the curses become. So you'll find a lot of people that go through deliverance. Somebody in their family dabbled in the Masons and things and took oaths. I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many times. But when I ask her that's one of the questions I always ask people. And there's other secret societies as well, and they're all bad. But when I asked her that, she said, "Oh yeah, my whole family's Masons, and I'm a rainbow girl." A rainbow girl.
What is
Rainbow
that?
girl means she's one of the child versions of the Freemasons.
Oh, okay.
So she's taking, she has taken the vows herself, all these things. And so I was like, okay, well, we got to renounce all that, and she had now I'm going to say something that's extremely controversial, but I'm telling you, I'm saying it to tell the truth, to help people. When people get tattoos, they need to be extremely careful what they're getting and where they're getting it, because you can get something that you don't even know that it's a symbol for something you don't know what it is. And where you get it can be significant. And she also had a spirit called Kundalini. Kundalini is a snake spirit. Kundalini comes from one source, and that is Hinduism. And she had so I'm going over a lot of people will get that practicing yoga, because even if they think I'm just doing stretches and exercise, that's all it is. Well, that's what you think it is, but don't tell a Hindu person that, because that is their sacred religious beliefs, and they know that it's very spiritual, and they know that you are aligning yourself in those positions to open yourself up to Kundalini, it's a demon. And they believe that when you go through yoga and you do these things, and eventually you open the third eye. And that means the Kundalini spirit, which resides at the base of your spine, has been awakened and weaved its way up, slithered its way up your spine inside of you to your brain, and then enlightens your third eye, opens your third eye. That's what they believe. Okay. So when you're doing the exercises and you think I'm just innocently done some stretches, that's all this is. Even though you think that's all it is, it might not be. So I asked her, I said, have you been involved in yoga or Hinduism of any kind? She's like, well, she had a life when she was a juvenile she had got involved in crime, which probably was due to the curses she was under. And she had to be incarcerated as a youth. And she said, well, there was like a workout program we did there, and maybe that was. And I said, were you done poses and stretches, blah, blah, blah? No, it was more weight training. I said, okay, that's not it. I said, I have to ask you a question, and I always ask this as well. Do you have any tattoos? Yes. What is it and where is it? And she said it was a butterfly on her lower back. And I was like, okay, on the lower back, that's where Kundalini resides. For some reason, I don't know why, but the butterfly in that area, in her case, opened her up to Kundalini. Sounds crazy, I know, but it did. And we went through, cast all these things out of her. I also had her break all curses over her son. One of the things that she had told me early on, when she first talked to me, was that her son would have experiences where this being would appear in his bedroom at night and tell him to climb out the window and run away and don't ever come back, and all these terrible things, And then she told me he keeps saying swear words, and I don't know where he's hearing them. The kid was like 3 or 4. And she said, I don't know where he's getting these words, because we don't talk like that around him. Like he's never heard it from us. I don't know where he's hearing them, but really bad profanity. She said, I saw him with his toy guns pretending that he was shooting himself in the head. And I was like, okay, which one of the spirits she had was suicide. She had a spirit of suicide, So I knew that, okay, this poor little kid, he didn't do these things. This is all because of a generational curse, and it's affecting him. So we need to break that too. So we did all that. We went through all of that and cast all these demons out. When we were done, I said, I'm going to pray over you one more time and just make sure everything left. And as soon as I started praying over her, she started to freak out again, manifesting. And guess what it was? It was the spirits that she had from Freemasonry had tried to stay. So we cast all that out of her, followed up with her after that. And she said, I feel so much better. She said, I'm very sore, which most people that go through a full on exorcism will be sore the next day or days following. But of course, remember, she was contorted and bashing her head off the floor and things like that, so she's going to be sore. But that's how that all went down, And I will tell you, for about a week after that, I was experiencing very strange things myself. This was in the spring of 2012. And I was experiencing a lot of strange things in my own house. And to the point that I went to when I was at my chiropractor, I was getting goosebumps to the point that they hurt. And that is generally, it's something I experience in a certain manner that I get it when I'm in the presence of demonic spirits, like when I start to discern something demonic. It's like when I'm discerning it and that spiritual gift is working, that is one way things are confirmed to me. Yep, you are right. That's what this is. I was experiencing that to the point that it hurt. So I asked my chiropractor, I'm like, hey, so you did these treatments on me, whatever. Could that explain, and I explained like what I was, those weird goosebumps. He's like, no, that's not really going to do that. And I'm like, okay, I was just curious, I don't go into detail with him about all that, but it was to the point that I was seeing orbs in my house, not catching them on film. I was seeing them. I remember at one point I was sleeping on my couch and my cat Moses came in the living room, and he was sitting right by the door that goes, if you go through that door, you can go straight into the kitchen, or you can turn right and go down into the basement. And I saw him walk into the room, and he was just sitting there. And I heard the stairs to the basement creak. And I saw like Moses, at this time they creaked, he looked back over his shoulder, like towards the stairs. And then he looked like he was watching something, and he looked up over his head and followed something like it floated past his head. And I was actually seeing orbs at the same time. Man. I had an experience one night. I was laying on my couch, and I was laying on my back, and I was asleep. And what I woke up to was something was pulling on my leg. They had me by my right foot. They had my foot lifted up in the air like they were going to start trying to pull me off the couch. And I woke up, and it dropped my foot. As soon as I woke up, like I felt my foot drop, and there was nothing there. So I mean, like those are just a few experiences that I had, like, during the times that I have, going through helping other people. But it is pretty much commonplace anymore. I just accept it as that's life now. Once your spiritual eyes are open, you recognize things. And to me, it's like, I don't like it. I'm not afraid of it. At the same time, like I think a lot of people that have had my experiences have had some of these paranormal experiences, but never went through everything I went through, and maybe don't have the same view I have a biblical worldview. If they don't, they could be a lot more afraid. But for me, it's like, I understand it. I know what it is. And so I'm not afraid like I think the average person would be, but at the same time, I don't like it at all, but to me, it's like, well, you get the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm is all around us. It is, in my opinion, more real than the physical realm, because the physical realm will die. It'll pass away. Our flesh dies, things on earth die, get corrupt, whatever, fall apart, whatever. Spiritual realm goes on forever. So to me, it's like, well, that's in some ways that's more real than the physical realm.
Yeah. And one thing about, and I want to go back to kind of the story about the woman.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, like the demon of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I was always kind of told was that it is like that. Like I know that there's demons of greed and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain specific thing that you have to do for each individual one? Since you said that she had like multiple, or is it the same? It's just all the same type of remedy.
Generally, what you do, I want to identify it. They do not want you to know their name. And the reason they don't want you to know their name is if you understand, I don't want to say the term demonology, but it is kind of like that. If you start understanding certain demons and what they do, what their purpose is, what they're all about, that will give you an idea sometimes. Okay, this person either dabbled in this or they went through a severely traumatic event and the Satan targeted them because they were so traumatized and they're a victim and this demon came on them because of that. Or there's a generational curse. Like, you want to identify who the demon is, and then what legal right do you have to be here? Why are you here? And those are two big things. And then after that is a process, regardless of what the demon is, it's going to be a process of making sure that person renounces things, renounces any legal rights that could have been given to that demon in their life, because they're only there if they have a right to be there. And that right isn't, a lot of people in the church think, oh, well, if they had a right, then that person sinned. Well, number one, nobody's sin free. The only person that was sin free was Jesus. So everybody has sinned. But most people that have demons, it did not originate with their own personal sin. They've got sin that, didn't help matters. But a lot of those people, had they not been born under generational curses, they would have never been taken down that path that got them into situations where they did stupid things, So basically, have the person renounce any sin, even renounce the sins of their ancestors, start breaking generational curses, things like that. And renouncing those things and breaking the curses and any legal rights that the demons have. By doing that, you're stripping away the demon's ability to stay. And
Man,
then
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what I do after that, and I do it because I saw this, and it's funny because I saw Bob Larson do it first, but I've known multiple legit, for real, deliverance ministers who go through the exact same process. They never heard about it from Bob Larson. They researched, they started like pastors that needed to help people. Darren Boyer is he's interviewed on my podcast, Stranger Than Fiction podcast. He's an exorcist and a deliverance minister. He does the exact same things because he found out this works, but you then make the demon renounce its legal right and confess that now that it has no more right to that person. It takes all, if there's any under its authority, you try to bind them to it and cast them that are under its authority out with it. But once you've made it, one thing I do, and a lot of these other ministers will do, is you make the demon say, having no more right to this person, I take now all under my authority, and I leave this person and go to the pit. They do not want to say that. But once they've confessed they're going to the pit, they come out of the person a lot easier.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, real quick though.
Go ahead.
So that I was about to just, if you could kind of tie in this too as well. Someone in the chat asked, are there any differences that you notice between a place being haunted and a person being haunted, and like the things that happen?
Yeah. There are some differences. And that's something where I'll give you another example. There are differences. And that's why you need to talk to the person. You need to ask specific questions that are going to tell you, okay, is there a problem with this place? What do you know about the history of your home? Things like that. But then also, did you ever have activity before you lived there? If they're like, yeah, okay, tell me about that. When do you first have memories of having activity? A lot of times their answers to specific questions will tell you if they have curses. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes they have curses and they just ended up, by their horrible, misfortune, they ended up in a horrible environment where there's some really bad stuff, no fault of their own, But generally, you discern that through asking questions and specific to the person and specifically about the location. If the person starts, and it's funny, I'm saying that because if I was at 225th Street and I was trying to get help from somebody and they said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, my last house was haunted. And it would be easy to think, well, okay, so the problem is with this person. And I understand that too. But you basically you're going to ask questions to discern between the two, or if it's both. And also that is one thing that, it's important to pray and let the Holy Spirit show you things. When God discerns things to you, and a lot of people that do deliverance ministry, if you're doing it, you should not be doing it necessarily like full on deliverance ministry unless you're called to it. It's a specific calling. Now, having said that, Jesus gave authority to all born again Christians to cast out demons, all of them. In Mark chapter 16, verse 17, in the Great Commission, he gave authority to all believers. Okay. But so in any person at any time could run into a situation where they need to cast out a demon, and that's, God's going to assist them. But when you're actually more like in a position where people are coming to you fairly regularly or frequently or whatever, so you kind of have a calling in that area, God's going to give you discernment where you know things that you only know them because the Holy Spirit showed you, not because the person necessarily told you. I'll give you another example. I was done an exorcism on a lady one time, and my mother and my sister were assisting me in doing it. And this person had dabbled in some bad stuff. It really got, I talked about the third eye. She had done all that stuff, and I kept feeling like I was hitting a wall in the deliverance. Like I would cast out some demons, and then I'd feel like I hit a wall. And I even called up a Methodist minister I knew that he did deliverance ministry. And I said, "Hey, Billy," his name Billy Vanderbilt. I said, "Billy, I need your help here. I need somebody else praying here." He goes, "Okay." And I said, "I also want you to hear some of this stuff that's going on here." But I very clearly, I felt the Holy Spirit told me she has this one particular demon. And I knew if you have that one particular demon, you went through some really bad abuse. But I also was like, she never mentioned any abuse. She absolutely, I talked to her in detail and she never mentioned this. And I asked her to be specific and honest about everything. And it was confidential. I'm not going to ever disclose who the person was, or, all these great minute details or anything. But I bound the demons and I called her back to attention. And I said, "Why didn't you tell me about the abuse?" And she said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "The Holy Spirit told me, but I said, you have this one specific demon and you only get that demon from abuse." And she said, "Yeah, I was." And she goes, "I didn't tell you. You're right." So those things are all relevant as far as when you start questioning the person and trying to discern what is going on, but I said that just to illustrate the point that the Holy Spirit will show you things that you have no way of knowing. And
Let me
that's
ask you.
not of us. That's of God. That God did it,
Let me ask you this though. This might be an interesting kind of thought. Do you think maybe that entity, that being, that demon, do you think it purposely, made her not tell just to see if you
That's
were for
very
real?
possible. They will hide. That is a great question and very possible. I will tell you another when you run into it, it is extremely deceptive. And it's in the book of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9. And I encourage anyone to go read. I love the King James Bible. I encourage you read the King James Bible. Just read the book of Mark once and look at all the cases of demons that Jesus dealt with and the disciples dealt with. But there was this one particular demon that this guy brought his kid to the disciples. Now, these disciples of Jesus had cast out all kinds of demons. He gave them authority to cast them out. They did it. And they returned and said, "Even the devils are subject unto us in your name." So this guy brings his children or his child to the disciples, and they said grievously vexed with a demon. They can't cast it out. And so they brought him to Jesus, and the father said, "I brought my son to your disciples, and he's, he has this devil, but they can't cast it out." And Jesus said, and it's funny, Jesus knew the answers to these questions already. He asked the questions I think for our benefit. He said, how long ago was it since it came on to him? And he said, since he was a child. And he said it's tried to kill him multiple times, all these terrible things it did to him. And Jesus called the demon by its name. It was a deaf and dumb spirit. And he called it by name, and it said, come out of him and enter no more into him. And the kid was having convulsions. I mean, very dramatic situation. And then the demon left him. And the disciples asked Jesus after that, they said, why couldn't we cast that out? And he said, that kind comes forth only through prayer and fasting. Now, one reason I love the King James Bible, and I encourage people to read the King James Bible, is most other versions of the Bible changed it. And there's a lot of other changes, but they changed that verse. And he said, that kind only comes out through prayer. And that is not true. That is not what the original text said. And the King James is accurate to the original text. You also have to do fasting. I have run into a spirit, a deaf and dumb spirit. And what they are very good at, they don't talk. When they fully manifest, a person becomes just like how that kid was having convulsions and all these other things, that's what they become. They groan like a deaf mute. They groan like not words. They just groan and they become violent. And the one thing they're really good at is because they don't speak, they could have, multiple other levels of demons underneath their authority. And you can't get to those demons until you deal with it. So you need to deal with the deaf and dumb, cast it out, and then move on, and it's deceptive because it won't talk. The first encounter I ran into that demon was in one deliverance session. And for like a month leading up to that, every day I would shut my eyes and I would open my Bible and I would open it right to Mark chapter 9. And I was living in Holmes County going through hell on earth at that time. And I kept focusing on the part of that chapter that says, to him who believes all things are possible. Because that's what Jesus said to that child's dad, and he said, I believe, help my unbelief, But I kept thinking, okay, God's saying to me, if you believe all things are possible, if you believe you will get out of this terrible situation and this haunting, you got to believe. So I kept thinking that's what he's preparing me I'm always opening it right up to chapter 9. Well, then I'm in this deliverance session and this demon is just sitting there staring at me. And I know it's a demon. It's not the person. And it's not talking. And I'm like, the light bulb goes off. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a deaf and dumb. That's why I keep opening my Bible to Mark chapter 9, because that's a chapter that also talks about the deaf and dumb. I grab my Bible. I start flipping pages to hurry up and go to chapter 9. And all of a sudden, this demon starts talking. Only I thought the demon started talking. It wasn't. It went down and sent up another one that was less of a threat. That demon came up and started talking to throw me off. That's how deceptive they are. So I was like, okay, I must have been wrong. And I dealt with that demon, cast it out. This person went through multiple deliverance sessions before they finally got rid of all the demons. Okay. Later on, that first session, there were 19 demons dealt with in one session. The next session I had with that person, they went to church and they went to the altar to pray and they started to manifest. And they were like, they're not going to know what to do. I got to get out of here. They left church. They were walking to their car and they said they heard someone behind them calling her name. She would turn around. There's nobody there.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
They get in the car. They called my mother and they said, we need help. They went straight to my mother's house. My mother calls me. Now, keep in mind, I'm in Holmes County going through hell on earth. And I'm like, I'm so down this particular day. I had not eaten since the previous day. It's now, mid-afternoon. And I'm just in a, slumber I'm in self-pity and I'm very down. I'm very depressed. And they're like, you got to get down here. They showed up here. You got to get down here. They need your help. I said, I'm in no condition to help anybody. I said, my exact words, because I felt so down and so oppressed. I was like, I can't do it. And I said, if I come down there and try to deal with those demons today, I will get my teeth kicked in. That was an exact quote. This individual's husband said, tell him he's stronger than he thinks he is because they do not want him here. She's freaking out that we called. And I was like, okay, fine. I said, I'm going to pray until I feel released that I need to do it, and I will be there. And, I never ate. I kept praying, and I prayed, just completely surrendered and prayed. And until I felt very strongly, God said, go, now's the time to go. So I drove 3 counties away, met them at my mom's house. When I went in, I went up on the side of the deck at the side of her house, and the individual that had the demons had gone into the bathroom, and her husband had gone to the door and kept his foot in the door so she couldn't lock herself in. And my mom opened the door very quietly, and we were whispering. So this person had no idea that I was there yet. And I said, where is she? And she said, well, she's in the bathroom. We're whispering very quietly. All of a sudden, I hear that spirit going berserk. And I go running down the hall. We flung the door open, and we were trying to pour out in the hall. This demon and it's a deaf and dumb, and it is violent, and it is groaning. And I put the Bible on her head, and I said, in Jesus' name, I bind you. I bind you in the name of Jesus. She went unconscious. She literally fell flat. We got her out into the dining room, put her in a chair. And I'm sitting there thinking, I fasted this time. I haven't eaten since yesterday, and I didn't eat, today at all. God told me it's time to go, so I'm ready, but I've never cast out a deaf and dumb. I can't go through all the questions I do normally, because this thing's deaf and dumb, whatever. And it definitely knew what I was doing, because I opened the Bible to Mark chapter 9. This is what I felt led to do. And I started reading that passage out loud. Okay, this individual's husband was probably at least 250, 260, right? She's standing up out of the chair with him on her back. She's scratching me, spitting on me, trying to knock the Bible out of my hands, everything else. And I read that passage all the way through where Jesus cast it out. I read it in, word by word. And then I said, in the name of Jesus Christ, come out now. And it did. It came out. She had no recollection. She's like, why are you bleeding? And I said, because you scratched me. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I said, it's okay. I know, but that demon, we can now get to all kinds of other demons that it was hiding. We could get to a whole nother level of demons because the deaf and dumb was cast out. That's how deceptive they are.
Let me ask you this question real quick. Does their physical appearance change at all?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Yes. It depends on the case. Number one, when there's a Jezebel fully manifested, I know, and it's generally, there's a look that comes in the eye, and there's an arrogance, the personality changes. And Jezebel's a very prevalent demon. And I know it when I see it. And it's just something that once you've encountered it, you know it. And it knows that you know it, But there were others in that case in particular. They were all acted different. It's like a whole different personality. There was one demon that we cast out that day that when it was manifested, when it was manifested, her eyes were wide open, and you could only see the whites of her eyes. Her eyes were completely rolled back in her head. You couldn't see the eyeball at all. Man. There was another one when it came up that, this is going to sound crazy, her appearance changed. Her hair looked darker. Her skin looked pale white. She looked like what Marilyn Manson makes himself look like.
Oh, wow.
That is what she looked like. Like that same skin tone, the pasty white, the hair looked dark. It's hard to describe, but
any of them that look like the chick from Exorcist, like the original?
I would say that is an extreme. That was a little bit of creative liberty, so to speak, on their part to show demon possession. And I've never seen it to that extreme. However, I've seen the faces contorted. I've heard different voices. I've seen the eyes roll back in the head, completely, different personality changes. I have seen people spit up stuff, not split pea soup like on The Exorcist, but spit up brown stuff. I mean, I've seen, there's truth in those things. Like what they put in the movie, there's an element of truth. I think they take creative liberty in doing their part to portray this is how weird this stuff gets, but I do think they overdo it also. But without any doubt, yes, I've seen the faces change. You're not talking to that person. The very first time I dealt with a demon, and I think I need to correct myself. I think that session, if I'm not mistaken, was the one where there was 19 demons. I believe was the second session with her where the deaf and dumb was present. I think that was where the 19 were. The first session, I was told this person was going to see an exorcist. He was a pastor, and she had asked me, will you go with me to see him? And I said, absolutely. At that point, I knew, and this is weird because I had not done an exorcism yet myself at all, but I knew that she had a Jezebel spirit. I knew what its name was, and I knew that the number 6 was significant. And I had told my mother, I said, I know what she has. I know what it is. And I know that the number 6 is significant, but I don't even know what that means because I didn't. I just knew those two things are true. Okay. They contacted me and they said, we need you to get down here right away. This person had asked me if I would go see this pastor. And I said, absolutely, I'll go. And then I said, but I know what you have, and I'm going to spill the beans to the pastor so-and-so. When I said that, she got real quiet, didn't talk for a little bit. And then she said, don't say anything else. And I was thinking, oh no, that demon's threatened and it's going to manifest. Next thing you know, I can hear all this commotion and weird screaming and a different voice in the background because my mother had gotten on the phone. This person had given the phone to my mother and she said, you need to get down here now. And I said, okay. And my mom had cast out a demon before. I hadn't. And I had asked her after she did it, I said, what's it like? Is it scary? And she said, oh no. She said, the Holy Spirit comes over you and you feel bold. It's hard to describe, but you have a holy boldness. And, she is exactly right. I was driving to that location. The hair on my arms was literally standing up, like straight up. I got there. They ushered me in a back door to get to where they had this individual. And I walked in and she was sitting in a chair. My mom was holding a Bible against her chest. And my mom was saying, tell me your name. And I walked in and this thing is freaking out. It's a completely different voice. The person's face is all contorted, a completely demonic voice. It's not her. And I walked in on that and I said, I know who you are, Jezebel, and you're leaving today. And it's turned and looked at me and said, how did you know? And I said, God told me and you're leaving today. It's like none of that is in my say so. It's not because it's all God, and it's like we cast it out, but here's the other crazy part. That Jezebel spirit had come into the family bloodline 6 generations earlier, and she got it through a generational curse.
Wow.
She never knew that I told my mom the number 6 is significant, or I don't even think I had told my mom what I believed its name was. I just knew what its name was, And there's a quote from John Wesley. There's multiple Christian denominations that supposedly follow the teachings of John Wesley. And to me, John Wesley is the greatest evangelist since the Apostle Paul. But he had a quote that he said, basically it's God that does the deliverance, and it's all done through his power, but he often chooses someone that none of us would think. So all the glory goes to him. So a lot of the times the people that do cast out demons, like if you just looked at them, you'd be like, they're not a pastor. They don't have like a doctorate in theology. They're not a priest. They're not this or that. But it's like he picks people that he chooses because it's him we're just a tool in his hand. We're an instrument in God's hand to do the deliverance. He's the one doing it, So
yeah. And then it's very interesting when it about the like deliverance type of, I guess you could say, ministry. Is that, I guess that's the correct way to say it.
mm-hmm.
I've known a few people who've done things like that. And I teased a story that was told to me. I think I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
of this person who literally, they go, spooky things, right? You know weird things. I said, well, I've seen some things, and
Mm-hmm.
and how they, how I'm just trying to be vague about it. And this person goes, well, I haven't ever told anybody this, but, and this is how I know what you're saying has validity to me,
Mm-hmm.
because this is where this was happening, was a very small town here in Oklahoma that this was happening at the time. And she's like, well, I hadn't really told anybody this, but you like spooky things. But my mom is a part of a deliverance ministry that's like, and she said like undercover. And I'm like, and I was like, what do you mean undercover? And she was like, well, they don't really like to publicize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you ask around, you'll find them.
Yeah.
But and I thought that was really interesting. And I mean, I heard that, it might have been 2010 when I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's weird that now I have this podcast, and and I've met people, in my life's journey, that have validity to what you're saying for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's what's so crazy about. No, it's not really crazy, but it's just interesting to me, and it's fascinating to me because those things are out there.
Yes.
In different cultures, they're called different things,
Mm-hmm.
and you got winter spirits, like depression,
Mm-hmm.
and like you say, oppression, and there's anxiety. There's all these
Mm-hmm.
different natives, especially kind of plains Indians. They believe in like the winter spirits.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain time we have to do things to make sure that they stay away.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is that it doesn't matter what culture, how, like what God, like, because there's only really, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I believe that there's only one creator.
Right.
He's out there.
Yep.
Now you call it, people call it this, people call it that, but I believe that there's one. There
Mm-hmm.
has to be. There's no. It doesn't make sense if there's not.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to me hearing you tell, different things that I've heard. And kind of another characteristic I'd like to ask you about while I'm being very long winded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do they have a smell to it? Like, is there a certain odor that they have?
Some do. Some do. I've seen that, and it's not always, but I've seen where we doing a deliverance and this putrid smell. And like, I'm going to tell you the one, me and my mom, like even the next day, I'm like, I feel like I cannot get that smell out of my nose. I said, I feel like I need to disinfect my Bible, and she's like, I know, me too, there is, and it's putrid. It's terrible. And that does definitely happen. I've known people who, there was a person that we did a deliverance on. It is in the medical field. I'll leave it at that. Very top of the medical field is one way of saying it without me going into too much detail. And that person had weird smells come from them, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And they went to another doctor, and they were like, I don't know what's going on here. And like, what is this? And the medical doctor even said, yeah, I do smell it too. I don't know what it is. This was not a person who was dirty. This was not, I mean, this person had good hygiene. They don't know what it was. Well, we ended up casting quite a few demons out of that person. And the crazy part, like during that deliverance session, I saw things out of the corner of my eye. Like I'm looking at this guy, and his wall in the room we were in, it was all, like white drywall. It was painted white. All the walls were painted white. And I'm looking at him, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something dark moving over on the wall to my left. And I like for a split second, I thought, oh, there's a mirror over there, and it's reflecting something on the other side of the room. And then I look, and there's nothing. I'm like, so don't ask me what I just saw, But it was interesting with him. We started casting stuff out, and my mom is a very devout Christian. I will tell you this, in deliverances where she has helped me, the demons do not like me. And, I remember one, I wore a shirt with Jesus's face on the front of it. And they didn't like that. They didn't like me, but they can't stand to look at my mom. They will turn their face completely away from her. They can't even stand to look at her because she's the one who taught me to be a Christian. She, and I don't know, there's just something there that, like, she's like the matriarch of the family, spiritually speaking, they do not like her. And the interesting part, like I've seen where these demons will do that. But in this particular deliverance session, I looked at my mom and I said, I want you to say what you think is there. And she just starts rattling off these demons that she thinks are present. And the deliverance went to a completely different level. And the next day, that individual did not remember the deliverance from that point till the end. They had no recollection of it at all. In most cases of a deliverance, if a person has demons, there'll be times, like even during the deliverance, where they're fully aware of what is going on, but like the person ministering deliverance is talking to the demon, and the demon is talking through their body, like they're a puppet almost, but they have, like, it's like they're part of the conversation from a third party perspective. They're watching it from inside their body, but they're not part of the conversation. They're watching it. And then there's times when the demon is 100% fully takes over the person completely. When that happens, the person has absolutely no recollection whatsoever of what happened. And when the deaf and dumb spirit fully manifested, that individual had no recollection whatsoever of that happening. In this case, like in that whole deliverance session, after that point where I looked at my mom and I said, what do you think he's got? And she just starts rattling stuff off, and it went to a whole different level. The demons came up completely. He had no recollection of that from that point on. Okay. So another question, I talked about asking questions when you're trying to discern if a person is haunted or if their house is haunted. One thing I will start to ask, I will say, do you ever have time loss? And the reason I say that is, and it happens a lot, they'll be like, like I'll be sitting there and I think that I was sitting there for 10 minutes and it's like 2 hours later. And I'm like, what in the world? I swear I was here 10 minutes, and things like that. And it's because during those times, a demon fully 100% manifested in their body. They don't know what they did during that time. Maybe they just continued sitting there. Who knows? But they have no recollection whatsoever of, what happened during that time.
Man, that's crazy. I mean, is there ever a time? And I got a question from the chat here.
Mhm.
How can you tell if the cord? And this is directly. I'm reading the question here. Sorry, if the how can you tell if the cords have completely been severed and not lying dormant? So have you? I guess, do you check back up on these people to see if these things are gone, or
Yes.
how does that go about?
Yeah, with the house or with the person, I try to follow up, And the other thing is I try to be very thorough with in the whole process. And like I had mentioned with that one, and it's funny you said Oklahoma, that is where the one individual was from that I had to do the deliverance, using her boyfriend as my eyes and ears, so to speak. um in that case, like, I went back and I was like, I'm going to make sure there's nothing here hiding, and there absolutely was. So I try to do that. I try to follow up with people. Another example, I was contacted just not that long ago by a family that I had helped back in 2014. And they said, hey, one of our daughter's friends um, needs to talk to you. She thinks there's something in her house. I said, okay, no problem. They gave me the number. I called this individual, and her stories are pretty creepy. And she had an accent. And I said, you're not from Ohio, I can tell, even though she lived in Ohio now, where are you from? And she's from another country. And I'm going down, asking these questions and things, and I determined that, okay, there is multiple spiritual issues here in her family. And the family was in a country where they believed that they had even been told that a witch doctor had placed a curse on the family, things like that. We went through prayers, and I led her through prayers renouncing those things and everything. And I followed up with her later, and she said, no, everything's been good. The house feels peaceful. I haven't had any more of those strange situations,
What does she
And I
see?
said, if anything changes, you let me know, because I'll be happy to help.
What were some of the
But
things she was seeing?
yeah, it's good to follow up. And I'm going to say this: you can't help everybody, and I wish you could. There's situations where if a person is doing things that are allowing a haunting to stay or allowing a demon to stay, if they're not willing to stop doing that and renounce it, you can't you can't cast anything out, because the demon's like, who are you to tell me to leave? They want me here. They like this behavior, and therefore I have a right to be here. So shut your mouth. The demon's like, I don't have to go anywhere. You can say Jesus all you want. I'm not leaving because this person gave me a right to be here. Or if a person has occult items in their house, has a Ouija board in their house and they don't want to get rid of it. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. If you want to keep a cursed object in your home, I cannot help you. So you want to help everybody. I want to help everybody, but it comes down to what a person is willing to deal with, you know? And
Let me ask you this question real quick.
mhm.
So what was she seeing? Like, what were some of those creepy things that she was dealing with?
She would see, for instance, there was a loft. The upstairs was like a loft in their house. And she would think out of the corner of her eye, she saw a black shadow person cross from one room upstairs to another room. But she said, when I'm watching TV, there's a mirror above the TV. And when I'm sitting on the couch, I can see through the mirror, and I will see it looking straight at it. I will see it go from room to room.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. And then the little girl was having nightmares. The child was having issues. And I told her, I said, it could be the house, but I said, I'm leaning towards, and I said, we're going to pray over the house too. We're going to do all that, but I really believe there's multiple issues here, generationally speaking. And she was willing to deal with it. She was more than happy to deal with it right then and there.
Man, yeah, that's some crazy stuff. I know different people are joining us, and they're like, man, this has been awesome so far, and it's been awesome, man. Like, I got a few more questions for you.
Absolutely.
One thing that is very interesting to me when it comes to, uh, the different people. Do you ever get, people talking about any type? And this is a question from the chat.
Mhm.
Have you had anybody, talk about an entity or dark spirit or demon that goes by the name Lich? Have you heard anything about that?
That name does not ring a bell with me, but that does not mean that that's not a legit thing. I'm going to tell you, I encourage you, anybody, just go on Stranger Than Fiction podcast on YouTube. I haven't made any videos in a while, but I tried to get some really good content in there. Look at the video with Dr. Darren Boyer. He's a deliverance minister. And he told me, and it's escaping my mind right now, but he told me, a deliverance minister that he had learned a lot from. And he said that guy had a huge book full of demons' names that he had encountered. And he said it's like the book is so thick, it's not funny. And it's name after name after name that he had encountered himself. So I'm just because I haven't encountered that name doesn't mean that that's not a legit demon name. And I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but the demons that were linked to Freemasonry in the girl that was from Oklahoma, they were using weird names too. So
Okay.
you got to think, there's so many different demons and there's so many different names. And my belief is strictly biblical. I believe, and again, I have never had a demon dispute this with me during an exorcism. Demons are fallen angels, and they work in different levels. Some are more powerful than others. There's ones who roam the earth. There's ones in the atmosphere. There's ones that are in hell. There, when the war happened in heaven, that the Bible says that Michael the archangel and his angels fought, And the dragon is Satan. The dragon and his angels fought and prevailed not. And there was no more a place found for them in heaven, and they were cast to the earth. So when they were cast to the earth, that means the whole earth realm. Hell's in the belly of the earth. You have the earth, you have the atmosphere in the realm of the earth, around the earth. Satan is called the prince and the power of the air, so you have him roaming this whole realm that we call earth, and in my opinion, they work in rank and authority underneath Satan. You have principalities that are over specific areas. They are extremely powerful, and they will use other demons honestly, a lot of the demons haunting houses, yes, they're very powerful. They're way more powerful than human beings, but they're not principalities, generally speaking. I will say that I heard this recently, and I really do believe that this is true. Again, I encourage people to look up a guy named Howard Pittman, Pittman, Howard Pittman. He was a Baptist minister, had a near-death experience. He actually did die in 79, I believe it was. He thought he was going straight to heaven. He was not. Even though he was a preacher and had all kinds of good works, he was doing everything for himself, and God was not happy with him. He would not have gone to heaven that day if that had been his final day. But instead, God gave him a complete view of the spiritual realm. And because he said, the Baptist didn't understand spiritual warfare. I didn't get it. I had no idea, never heard sermons about the devil. And he said, God showed him this whole spiritual realm and sent him back. And I encourage you to look him up because it's extremely valuable information. Okay. But he said that principalities are generally assigned to areas of the earth. And he said America has a lot of principalities assigned to it because we were founded on Christianity. Areas that don't have, that are, not Christian nations, he said they'll have principalities too, but not as many. But he said you can have a principality assigned to a person if that person is going to do a lot for the kingdom of God and a lot of damage to the kingdom of darkness. Satan will just assign a principality to that individual to try to destroy them, which I had never heard that before until recently. And I was like, man, it actually does make sense.
Well, that's like I mentioned this before on our last conversation of that show Evil it was on CBS. Now it's on Paramount Plus.
Okay.
But that's exactly what they talk about in that show is that, they realize that there's these people out there that can make a difference in this war, the spiritual war. And they do different things, and it becomes a storyline in the show. But that's very interesting, that they're talking about that at that level on CBS.
Yes. I'm going to tell you this, along with countless stories I can tell of the paranormal that are, oh yeah, that was demonic. It was creepy. It was demonic, whatever. I do have ones where there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that was divine intervention and God just intervened. I've had it multiple times. Years ago, there was a woman that I knew, and her cousin were asking me about spiritual warfare and whatnot. And I knew they were under curses, but the one lady had issues in her house, and she's like, well, I started asking her questions, and it turns out she's into all kinds of occult stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of people won't like this, but astrology, anything where you are seeking hidden knowledge is of the occult. That's what occult means. And so when you're seeking the stars for answers or whatever, anything like that, it's of the occult. And she had all these books on this and numerology and all these things. And I said, you need to get those out of your house. That's your problem. And she got very upset. And she said, well, my pastor doesn't say there's anything wrong with them. She went to a very big mega church in Canton, Ohio. And my exact words were, that's because your pastor's an idiot. I said, you need to get that stuff is strictly prohibited in scripture. You need to get rid of it or you're going to always deal with this. They just started mocking me, and I was like, whatever. I tried to help you, whatever. Goodbye. Well, when you come under those attacks, it does bother you. It just does. So like the next day I go to work and that's in my mind. I'm thinking about it, and I finished up working and I was driving home. And I knew when I got home that night, I worked till midnight and I knew driving home, when I get home, I got to do a workout. I got to lift weights and I was tired. So I stopped at a convenience store and went in and bought a energy drink. Okay. And, I had a wad of cash in my pocket and I generally don't carry a lot of cash on me, but I had just sold a lawnmower or something and I had several $100 on me. Okay. So take my energy drink up to the counter and I paid for the energy. I took out a wad of cash, pulled off a $5 bill, put the money back in my pocket, paid for the energy drink. I turn around and I start walking away from the counter and I heard a voice in my head. And if you read my books, you'll know there's different cases where I've had these things happen, where a voice in my head, it's not my conscience or something. It's another voice and it's always positive. It's always a warning. It's always something that I need to know. And I heard this voice say, stop and turn around and go back to the checkout and look on the floor. And I thought to myself, why would I do that? I didn't drop anything. And I kept right on walking. I got to the door. I was just about to push the door open and exit. And I heard that voice say, stop and turn around and go back to the checkout and look on the floor. I was like, okay, whatever. I turned around, I start walking back and I'm looking at the floor and I'm like, what is that? A coupon or something? I walk up, it's $100 bill. I dropped $100 bill on the floor. I had no idea I dropped $100 bill on the floor. Not any inkling that I had dropped money. I went out to my car and I very clearly, I felt God said to me, you hear from me. Other people that don't like that or don't like when you share the truth with them, they're going to mock you. They're going to make fun of your beliefs, but you really do hear from me, and it was like, okay, that's just a really small, kind of unimportant experience. It's like, I'm happy I didn't lose $100, but it's like, God will do things like that because he does speak to us. If we're open to it, he will speak to us. And, often the Bible calls it a still small voice. It's the Holy Spirit. Sometimes you may hear an audible voice. I'm not saying that's out of the realm of possibility, but, I've had one time I was driving to work and I'm behind this white pickup truck driving up 77 North. And I'm driving to work and I'm thinking, man, this guy's he's in the passing lane and he's kind of driving slow. He wasn't going as fast as I wanted to go anyway. And he's in the passing lane. And I heard a voice say, pass him in the other lane. And then I thought, okay, I'll pass him in the other lane. And I changed lanes. Now, unbeknownst to me, in the back of that pickup truck was some kind of a snowboard. And I didn't see it. It was laying down in the back in the bed of the truck. But when I started to pass the truck in the right-hand lane, I see that snowboard start flying around like the wind catches it and it starts flying around in the back of the truck. The wind catches it. It flies out of the back of the truck and bounces down the freeway behind the truck. If I had not changed lanes, it would have hit my car and at the very least damaged my car. How can that not be divine intervention?
That's something.
Yeah. And it's like, I have many experiences like that, and it's like, to me, it's like the Christian life and life in general is very spiritual if you're open to seeing it. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like the Christian life it is real. It is dynamic. I do come under a lot of spiritual attack, no question about it. But it's like, well, what other option is there? I get it. I understand this. This isn't necessarily what I would have chosen for myself, but it's real. And I'm happy that God does look out for me and I'm happy about that,
Yeah. And, one thing that's, interesting about, and I always call it I call it spidey sense. It's kind of what I even say it in my intro of the podcast. I get that spidey sense.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, when it comes to dreaming and things like that, there's been times where I've dreamed about a situation and it ends up becoming true. And I know exactly what's going to happen so I can maneuver, my life or whatever it is.
Yep.
it's just very interesting. Another question that's popped in my mind when you were talking about, Howard Pittman and how he, basically died, went to hell.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, they kept him from God kept him from hell, but he said, if this was your time, you would be going to hell. You're not ready to go to heaven. You're not right with me. But he said, I'm going to send you back and I have a mission for you. So he came back and he said, even being Baptist, he said, I was going straight to hell if that would have been my final day.
yeah. And one question that I have always had, a story that was told to me a couple years ago about double dipping preachers
Hmm.
that they serve both.
Hmm.
Have you heard anything about that?
There, it happens. It absolutely does happen.
Because I thought it was very interesting because there was a guy who, and he was a young guy. His parents dropped him off at his buddy's house, and he, they walked in. It's like, Christian, cross hanging up on the wall. They got pictures of Jesus. Just kind of classic
Hmm.
Christian home. People
Yeah.
that, and he, didn't think anything about it. And then they left and came back, and all of a sudden he realized that everything was turned upside down and backwards. And
Hmm.
he was like, "What?" And the kid goes, "Hey, I just want to let you know that my dad, he double dips." And
Wow.
he was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Don't say anything about it. We just kind of keep it, but it's his day job funds his night job." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh." He was like, "Okay." But I was just curious if you heard anything about that. That's the only time I've heard. I know it might be, few and far between.
How better could you destroy people's faith in the church by doing that? And you like, I guarantee what he does preach is probably not truth. So he's misleading people and he's done the devil's work right there, you know. And it sounds crazy, but that stuff does happen. It really does. The other thing you'll find is a lot of people, there's people high up in churches and many, many, many pastors that are Freemasons. And it's like, if you study Freemasonry, okay, you got pastors that are taking blood oaths. You got pastors that if you go to the 17th degree, they tell you when you reach like the 32nd or 33rd degree that, by the way, we worship Lucifer. But when you get to level 17, they say, oh, now we're going to give you this name that you need to know. This is the real name of God. And this is the name in the afterlife that you say this name and you'll be ushered right into heaven. Okay, great. What's the name? Abaddon. Abaddon is the demon that is over the bottomless pit.
Mm,
And they're telling people that that's God's name and just say that name when you die and you'll go straight to heaven. That's at level 17. And you have a lot of ministers and people on church boards and deacons and everything else are Freemasons. And it's like, okay, if you got in that and you go to that level, don't tell me you didn't know better.
yeah, and eventually one of these days I may tell you, off the podcast, but I had a run in with a Freemason when I was in Houston, when I was in
Hmm.
college,
Hmm.
and it. I'm not gonna lie to you. He knew things about me that not a lot of people knew,
Yeah.
and it spooked me. It spooked me.
Yeah.
I'm like, "How did you know that?" And he was like, "Hmm." But I ain't gonna talk about it because I'm getting goosebumps. I don't. I've never I've never told the full story. I've only told
Hmm.
it one time ever in my life, and that
Yeah.
was to my wife.
Yeah.
I get scared talking about those guys. And like I
Hmm.
said, no disrespect if that's what you do and that's what you're on, man. Hey, more power to you, I guess. But
Well,
we look through pop culture, just even with the Killers of the Flower Moon that just came out.
mhm.
The guy that was controlling the town, he was the head Freemason for that area.
Yep. Yep.
He was. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, when you say that, I'm going to tell you right now, in real life, most communities, if you really knew, that's why it's a secret society. If you really knew, most of the people in the positions in the communities are Freemasons. If you want to get promoted in the military or the police, if you become a police officer or if you are in the military, if you want to get uh, promoted, join the Freemasons. If you're an attorney and you want to win cases, become a Freemason, because a lot of the judges are Masons, and they're always going to side with, okay, if you're a criminal and you're a Mason and you go into court and you're charged with something, you give hand signs, you do certain gestures, the judge is a Mason, you get off. If the attorney's a Mason too, on the other side, you're probably going to get, the charges are going to stick because he's going to go with him. But otherwise, they're loyal to each other and they protect each other at all costs.
You know, and I've heard that too. The same gentleman that was telling me about double dipping, and in the chat, someone asked what double dipping is. Well, what I'm saying by double dipping, I'm using slang, but basically, you're a preacher for God during the day, and then you're worshiping Satan at night.
Yep.
That's what double dipping. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Sorry for the. If I use slang a lot, so people are like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh well," but yeah, man, that whole Freemason thing is gives me goosebumps. It makes me nervous, but I definitely it's more prevalent, like I said, in pop culture now than it ever has been.
Yeah.
You know, I had I'll give this short story. I had a buddy of mine, friend. Well, he guess he really was a kind of coworker too, I guess, but he was training to get accepted into that, and there were certain things that he had to do. And if you guys go listen back to, there's a video on the podcast that I talk about my recreation center that I used to be a director over. I tell some of that what he was doing, but one of the stories, you know, before all that started happening, he would tell me, he would be like, "Hey, I'm gonna write this symbol," and he would write this intricate symbol that I'm like, it's just, you know, I'm thinking it's like chicken scratch,
Right.
you know, it doesn't look like something familiar,
Right.
and he draws it and he says, "Yeah, I put them all over the building," and I was like, "Okay, well, you know, I'm protected. I think, you know, I got native juju on me." You know, passed down, you know, things like that. You know, allegedly, I'll say allegedly for everybody. You never know, but you know, I always try to carry myself right. I try to,
Right.
but he put them all over the building. And one night I'm sitting there and it's real late, man. It's like probably 10:30. The pool closed at 9. I had to shock the pool and I had to take care of some paperwork for the state, because you know, pool operator's license, you got to do a whole bunch of stuff with paperwork, so you don't make anybody sick or anything. But
Right.
so I'm sitting there and I'm filling out this paperwork, trying to get out of there. It's 10:30. It's dark. I'm tired. I've been there, you know, forever. And I thought I heard something behind me, and I looked and there's nothing there. And I said, "All right, now I always talk." I'm like, "All right, you can go on, you know, get out of here." And all of a sudden I heard a laugh come from the hallway. And I'm like, I'm getting goosebumps right now. But
Yeah.
I heard a laugh, and it was his laugh. It was my coworker's laugh. And so I asked him kind of random. I said, "Hey, you here the other night?" He said, "Maybe." I said, "Okay." But yeah, those things are that stuff, and them trying to get into that was, you know, he would tell me some things I don't want to share on the podcast, because I don't want him coming after me. But it was some pretty intricate things where I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, that's weird."
Do you think when he said maybe, was he referring to soul travel?
Could have been. I think. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. In native medicine, native magic, those things can happen. You can do those things.
It's real.
You can do those things.
Yeah.
I think he did that quite a bit. There would be things that I, you know, would be, you know, I would say, or not really derogatory or anything, but just kind of like in passing, where I'm just like, "Hey, we need to do this," and he'd be like, "Oh," and then he would know.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a future book I'm going to write, which is going to be extremely controversial and very, very, very interesting. I had a situation where I had to work with someone who was a full-on witch, wizard, whatever he wants to call himself. He was a Satanist in my book. Very evil. And there was activity like that, I mean, straight up paranormal. And he would know about it even though he wasn't there when it happened. And I was like, yeah, that's what, when you said that, that's exactly what it reminded me of.
Yeah, and so when there, like I said, there's a lot to that story, but I guess I can share it here. If people hadn't listened to it. Give everybody something good. It's Friday night. Give them a little, a little spooked out a little bit. But the kids would always be like, Mr. Tiger, hey, um, there's something in the little kid's bathroom. Well, I found out later on that he was playing one of these. What do they call that? It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's like,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? It's one of those
Yeah.
type of games where it's
Yeah.
not.
Like Magic the Gathering or something.
Yeah, he was
Mhm.
playing it with the kids. Before they go out and swim. In the mornings. You get a little free time. Kids can kind of run around, do what they want to do, and they were playing that game. Well, one of the kids said, "Hey, yeah, we've been calling this. The bathroom light has been. The bathroom has been. Doors been opening by itself. Lights been turning on by itself. But we've been calling it the poop man." And I kind of thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Y'all being little kids crazy.
Yeah.
And one night I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, it's time to head on out. Like I said, I was there all the time at night by myself, and I go back to make sure everything's locked, everything's good, and I walk over. Every light in that building was off except for my office light, and I walk back and that bathroom light was on, and the door was closed, but the bathroom light was on.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, that's weird. I go and turn it off, and I pack up. Well, this is where it kind of spooked me out. Where it really spooked me out. Excuse me. One of the little girls. Dang, I'm choking over here. But one of the little girls kind of pulled me to the side, said, "Mr. Tiger, I got to tell you something." And I'm like, "What? What's going on?" She said, "I don't want to go in that room by myself." And I said, "What do you?" I said, "Why not? I'm right here. I can see you. You just grab." All she had to do is go in there and grab her towel because they were
Yeah.
going out to the pool. That's all
Yeah.
she had to do. Literally, her towel was sitting on the table. Right where I could see her. Because it's glass windows, you can see directly
Yeah.
into the room. Like there's,
Yeah.
for the safety thing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go in there. I said, "Why?" She goes, "He's in there." I said, "Who's in there?" So I went and looked. I said, I was thinking somebody,
Yeah.
creepy, creeper guy. So I go in, I'm looking. She's like, "No, there's some." She's like, "I don't want to go in there. I don't want to be in there by myself." I said, "Okay." Well, I said, "Well, let me go in there and grab it." I said, "Which one's yours?" She goes, "This one." I said, "Okay." I grabbed it. And I said, "Well, let me know if if you, if you need anything or whatever. Because, I'm in charge of the building. I want to make sure everybody's safe.
Right.
So she's like, "Yeah, okay, well." And so but she wouldn't be in that room by herself. She said she would see, and she was kind of a odd girl.
Hmm.
It's like she knew things beyond her years a little bit. Like she was
Yeah.
really intelligent, really, like she would, she knew like her reading level was like high school level. And being in mind, this little girl's like in second grade. Like
Yeah.
she was high school age like she was with it. Like,
Yeah.
'cause she knew, she was like, "There's something in there, and I don't want to go in there by myself."
Hmm.
But yeah, and some of part of me too is maybe it was already there because that center is right on, a big Muskogee Creek, you know, town. You still
Yeah.
have a lot of Muskogee Creek people over there, and when they dug that building out, and you just never know what you moved around, and what's what. But that kind of reminds me of another time. We were Well, some of my lifeguards, they had like a little spirit box, which I am no like I don't approve of that. Another that stuff spooks me out. I don't really like messing when I hear like hearing voices.
Yeah.
But one of the girls had one of this, like they went and downloaded and paid the $4.99 or whatever it was, and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Tiger, we're gonna go in here on our break, and we're gonna see if the poop man's gonna talk to us." So they go in there and they use it, and the literally the entity said one of their names.
Wow. That's weird.
I was like, and they were like, and they come running out, freaking out. And they said, "We're never going in there again." I said, "What's going on?" He said, this thing said my name. I was like, ugh, that's creepy.
Yeah, that's definitely creepy. I'm going to say that guy, whatever those symbols were, he put them around there for a reason. And he was basically like marking the place for his own spiritual stuff. And I'm going to go, and this is me speculating only, but if he's done soul travel and then there's weird, like to me, that's like, you're trying to scare little kids. What's your problem? You know, why are you doing stuff in a bathroom where there's little kids? What's your problem? You know? And the idea of even wanting to put symbols up and things like that, like what you were saying, like, and then it certainly seems to me like he was done soul travel. That guy, he's probably got a darker side than we even know.
Well, there's a lot more to that story. I'm gonna be honest with you. There's a whole lot more to that story.
Yeah.
I mentioned it. I've mentioned it briefly, but basically, that he was the guy he's the same guy that was telling me about the double dipping. He was the one that told
Mhm.
me about that.
Yeah.
And you're definitely you're definitely going to like this, like this story. But I'm sitting there one night or one day, and we're it's real dead. And he goes, "Hey man," he's like, "Let me tell you this crazy story. You're not gonna believe me." I say, "Yeah, I don't. People tell me stories, I listen, but there's certain things that I hear in stories. I'm like, okay, this person's telling me the truth.
Yeah.
Like, there's something
Yep.
to this."
Yep.
Well, we're sitting there, and he's like, and by the way, podcast audio people, I don't think I've ever told this on the podcast, so you are getting something fresh here. Um, so we're sitting there, and he's like, "Yeah, man. When I was a little guy, I used to go over to these. We used to play, and I believe I don't want to give the name of the park, but for people that live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's north of 41st Street, in between Yale and Sheridan. So do your research. I don't know, but there's these tunnels that go all over Tulsa, and some of the tunnels go all the way to downtown. It just depends on where they come out, because for whatever reason they had tunnels built. And he was telling me that all the time that his friend would always say, "Don't go down this one," and he always was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, it's because there's something down there." And he's like, "No, there can't be anything like that." And so they go down there one day because they were like, "Oh, let's get the nerve and do it." Well, they go down there and they see an altar down there with all these, crazy markings of
Yeah.
whatever could be.
Yeah.
And he sees now he didn't he saw something on the altar. Now he assumed it was like it was childlike, like it would look like a
Mhm.
little baby, but he
Mhm.
couldn't tell. He
Right.
was like, because it was so dark in there. But they're sitting there and they have their little flashlight, and they can see on up. And he looks up, and all of a sudden he realizes that there's something in the middle of the tunnel that's darker than the tunnel, darker than light.
Wow.
And all of a sudden he's like, "What is that?" And his buddy's like, "We got to go right now. It's here." And so his buddy takes off, but he stays, and he says if he felt it go through him, he felt it go through him, and then he took off running. And there's a whole lot more to that
Yeah.
story on his others in his adult life and things like that. But you know, when he told me that, I looked at him. I said, "Well," I said, "What did it?" I said, What'd you do?" He said, "Man, I don't think I was ever the same. I haven't been the same since. I've always."
Yeah. When you're saying that, it's really funny because there's a story that's going to be in my next book, Shadows and Light, where somebody had something like just like that happen. And they said this black shadow person passed right through them. And I said, "Did you see it come out on the other side?" Because I was like, they got possessed. And absolutely that's what happened. He said no. And he said, I couldn't even control. I was full of rage after that. I couldn't control it. And there's way more to that story, but that'll be for down the road. But that when you just said that, he said it passed through him. It possessed him.
See, that's what I'm wondering too. I mean, he was in a rock band and things like this, and in his younger years, and they even went back and took pictures with it. And he I'm not going to speak ill of him. He was a good guy to me. We
Hmm.
were both Cherokee,
Hmm.
and he was always real good to me. But he knew things. I knew he knew things because the
Yeah.
way
Yep.
he moved like, he was never worried, and if he was worried, then things would start moving. Different weird stuff would start happening. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it when I heard that, I said okay, and so I said, what happened after? He said, well, I just went on about my life. He's like, and then he got into different medicine and slash magic, like
Yep.
there's different, he got into that basically after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it probably was something pushing him that way, and it's funny what you said about like that meeting site, that ties into another story that's going to be in um Shadows and Light. And I'll tell you, that's another thing, is you got to be very careful in those areas, because if that's areas where something was conjured and you go there, you might take it home with you, or you might get possessed by it, and things like that. And I'm telling you, that's when you're saying those, I'm like, oh boy, it reminds me exactly of this story or this other story. That stuff's for real. Got
Yeah,
to be very careful.
and another detail is that when he showed me where it was at, I did a little bit of searching. There was used to be a hospital around there.
Okay.
Like there used to be like I don't know if it was a hospital or if it was some type of, I don't know, maternity ward back in the day. Back in the day, so like in the 50s, they used to, how they
Hmm.
used to have just regular buildings as a hospital.
Yeah.
That was kind of where that was, and allegedly one of those tunnels goes into there. Uh, that's what he was told, and he was in different circles, and he was now at the time was trying to get into the Masons, and he had options, and he mentioned that the options were like Knights of Columbus, a few
Yeah.
other
Yep.
places.
Yeah.
Maybe I've said too much. I don't know.
Well, those are all like different, all those secret societies, in my opinion, all have similarities, and I don't think any of them are good, but that's interesting, and that's another thing too. Like we think in a community, like, we think, oh, well, this, what the community's like now is probably always like this, it's like, no, might not be. It might be this was completely different 100 years ago, and you don't know what happened here,
Yeah.
one of this, again, it keeps tying into my next book, but there's things I uncovered with multiple murders, um, in an area, a very deeply hidden suicide in the same area, multiple like crazy things that people forget about. They forget about those things happen because time passes, and it's like, yeah, and they come along 100 years later and move into a house there, and you may have problems, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. That's so people. I have had people ask me, "What really scares you?" That's what scared. Like that's what honestly really scares me. That and the tie snake, which is a native, uh, entity, a being that that is in the waters. But
Mhm.
those things, those things really spook me out because you can control, what comes and goes in your area.
Yeah.
You have a little bit, everyone has control over what their decisions are and what choices they make. But like at the same time, like you could be going to a store and you bump into somebody, and next thing you know that that something happens, and
Yep.
like I mentioned on the a previous that previous episode that I was talking to a guy who did delivery ministry, and he was talking about running into one of these people that he felt that he knew something was on this person,
Yeah.
and he basically was he trying to get this guy to talk to him, and the guy would never talk to him. But then the guy opened up and was like, "Yeah, man, I'm really dealing with this, and I sold my basically said he sold his soul."
Yeah.
And the guy was like, "Well, we can try." Like, he was just trying to get him back, trying to get him out of that situation. But then the guy kept getting phone calls, and this is where I believe that that's where they keep people under their grasp.
Yeah.
As the guy kept getting phone calls, interrupting the conversation. He said, "Well, this is my buddy or whatever he was saying." All of a sudden, that person that was calling him showed up and said, "We need to go right now. You need to get away from him." And he never saw that person again.
Yeah.
He went to that store multiple times to try to find him, and he just never could.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But Patrick, man, we went 2 hours.
Mhm.
Man, you you definitely knocked it out the park again, man. Especially with a lot of the stories. Um, I'm glad that we were able to work out a time to get you back on. And we, like
I
I
am
said,
too.
I'm glad. I'm glad, and hey, we might have to come back for a part 3 down the road, man.
I would
'Cause
love to. I would
yeah,
love to. I'll have that book done, the next one done here, not too much longer. And I'm telling you, the stories in there and even the pictures in there, the evidence in there is going to blow people's minds. And it is creepy, but I always try to bring it back to the truth. Like the details of the haunting themselves can be absolutely terrifying. But I'm doing my homework. I'm digging because a lot of these things with hauntings, I want to get back to what exactly started this, and that just trying to do that can take me into one case back over 100 years, researching history and murders in the area that nobody even knows about anymore.
hmm
And so I have had my work cut out for me on this book, but I'm telling you, it's crazy the stuff that will be in it and the things that I have gone through since I started working on it. I started working on this book in 2021, and it has been crazy the amount of things I've had to deal with during this time. But it's like, well, it's still going to get done eventually, and hopefully soon.
yeah. Hopefully soon. I'd love to hear it. There was somebody that follows my podcast.
Hmm.
She goes by the name Miss B. I don't think she was able to join tonight, but uh, she on the last episode, wanted to say that she really enjoyed both your books, and that she can't wait to listen to this episode because she knows you're gonna bring the heat. So I just wanted to let you know that there's people over here that appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone who listens. And if you guys want to check out the books, they're at Amazon. You can get paperback, Kindle, or audiobook. I do appreciate reviews if you do read them. I've had people tell me that Amazon's not letting them leave reviews. So that's kind of weird, but whatever. Also, if you want to check out like Stranger Than Fiction podcast, there's just some video. I haven't done any in a while, but there's some good information on there. I tried to interview some people that had, deliverance ministers and people. The one girl from England I interviewed, she actually dealt with being possessed.
Wow.
And then, people that had some pretty incredible experiences, near death experiences, things like that. So you may or may not, you may find it interesting. So.
Definitely, yeah, guys, go check him out. Go get his books. Go, because there's a lot of he's only hit on a fraction of what he's talking
It's a
about.
fraction, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's got a lot of information, and so definitely go get with his books and definitely check out his podcast. But Patrick, I appreciate you coming on, man.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I would love to do it again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, guys, you guys can catch me at TikTok Warcry Pod, the Gmail. If you got a story or want to share something with me or let me know what you think about the podcast, realwarcrypod@gmail.com. Also, to Facebook, Yohola Tiger. I've got a lot of messages from people, and I appreciate it. I sometimes it takes me a minute to get to them, with life, but I appreciate it. There was a lot of people that were coming over from Cryptids of the Corn. They'll be on Sunday, and then I have on Tuesday horror movies with Kevin Nez. We'll be discussing a lot more different, variety of stuff. But I cannot say it enough. I appreciate everyone who keeps supporting the podcast, and also, like I said, supporting people I have on my podcast because I believe in, the things that they do and the information and knowledge that they have. So go back and listen to all the interviews that I've done with people like Patrick Meechan, people like Rod from Lodge Tales, Dono from Red Scares, and many other people, Hunters of the Paranormal, a Mysterious Nocturnum. So I appreciate it, guys, and I'm going to catch you on the next one.